From Social Prosperity Partners, this is Community Catalysts. Welcome to Community Catalysts, the podcast that examines the qualities of community leadership and the many paths and forms it can take. I'm your host, Matt Lehrman. Last April, I had the honor of conducting a workshop on civility and community engagement for the Virginia Municipal Clerks Association. It offered a deeply meaningful opportunity to delve into the vital, yet often hidden role of municipal clerks. Those are the professionals entrusted with essential tasks such as maintaining official records, ensuring transparency in local government operations, facilitating communication among elected officials and the public, and managing key administrative functions. Many spoke candidly about the challenges they face in fulfilling those responsibilities, situations exacerbated by local city council dysfunction and heightened by the tension of political division at the national level. For our discussion today, I'm honored to be joined by Camisha Brown, who serves as Executive Assistant to the County Administrator and Clerk to the Board of Supervisors of Dinwiddie County, Virginia, which, for those of you who like the details, was founded in 1752, is home to about 28,000 people, and is located south and slightly to the west of Richmond. Welcome, Camisha.
Hi, Matt. So excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with what I think is the foundational question that I posed at the conference last April. I asked the clerks to identify the key principles or values that shape the responsibilities of a municipal clerk. And the most frequent answers were integrity, honesty, organized, transparency, neutrality, trustworthy, ethics, and responsibility. So with that in mind, help us understand, how do you explain the job of a municipal clerk to someone who doesn't really know anything about the way towns and cities and counties are structured?
The best way for me to explain what a municipal clerk is or what we do, we're essentially the bridge that connects the government to the citizens. A lot of times as a citizen, you don't typically get to speak to leadership within your municipality. You don't get to speak to the city manager or the county administrator on a day-to-day basis. That's kind of where the clerk comes in, especially for city council and board of supervisors, because 9 times out of 10, for my locality, my board members, they have typical day-to-day jobs. So they're not in the government center 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, they're not here. So that's essentially where I fill that gap for the board, is where if a citizen has a concern, a question, they want to come to a board meeting, they want to know what's on the agenda, that's where the clerk steps in and informs the public as to what's going on within the board. And also at the same time, I'm the one that keeps the board informed with what's going on within our community.
Camisha, how did you decide that you wanted to be a municipal clerk?
That's an interesting question, to explain that, because when I started in local government, being a municipal clerk was not my first job in local government. I actually did work for the Department of Development and Building Inspections. So I was in a completely different department before I became a municipal clerk.
Okay, so how did you get into it? Did someone suggest that this might be an option for you? Did you see a job posting somewhere? What?
So I actually became very friendly with the city clerk at the locality I was working at. And just in conversations with her and seeing what she did on a day-to-day basis and her seeing what I did on a day-to-day basis, she was very open, honest, blunt. That's what I loved about her. She just approached me one day and she just said, "Hey, just want you to know the assistant city clerk position is going to be opening soon. And, I see you have a lot of potential and I think you are worth so much more than what you're doing now. And If you would like an opportunity for a career change and be in a career that I think you would excel at, apply for the position. And, if you get an interview, come interview and we'll see what happens. So after that conversation, I kind of, went home and just kind of did my own little personal research into like what a clerk does. And I was familiar with her and her work and the council. So then I decided, after just doing, like I said, a bit of my own little research, I decided to apply, and I was given an interview. I had to sit with a panel of, like, I believe it was 4 people. I interviewed against maybe 5 or 6 other individuals, and I was chosen as the top candidate for the assistant city clerk position. So that's how I got into the clerk's office.
See, I think that's a great story because, like I said in the intro, the position of a municipal clerk is very much a hidden kind of position. Not a lot of people know that it exists. So it's just really interesting to know how you found it and what your pathway was to get there in the first place, and to know that there was someone who saw you and said, you have skills, you have talents, and I think this might be an interesting avenue for you. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I hope that's a friend that you go back and thank periodically.
Absolutely. I definitely remind her I wouldn't be where I am or be as successful as I am if you had not seen that in me first.
Of course, that's what you say on the good days. On the bad days, you get to call that person up and say, you're responsible for getting me into this, right?
No, because it still falls on me. And, I know there's always going to be good and bad days with any career, anything in life. You're going to have good and bad. So you just got to take them hand in hand and take one day at a time.
Camisha, as I was preparing for our discussion today, I was going through a mental exercise, and I want to just run this by you and see if we're kind of on the same page here. I think if you ask people in a community to name the municipal leadership positions of where they live, you would hear a lot of other responses before anyone would come up with the job title of municipal clerk. They would say mayor, council member, supervisor in a county, things like that. So when I think about the quality of leadership that a municipal clerk supplies, the exercise that I kind of was thinking about was, if local government was a human body, what are the organs that represent the different functions that exist? So tell me if you think I'm on the right track here. The city council or a county board, I think of, that's the brain. That's where policies are set and direction is set. The mayor, or I don't know, you got a chairman of your board.
Chairman.
The mayor, the chairperson, that's the heart. That's the emotional and the symbolic leader. Then I think about the city administrator, or I know at your county, you've got a chief administrative officer. And again, in a metaphor of a body, I think of that person as being the central nervous system. That is, they are signaling and coordinating all the different parts to make everything move together. So here's my question. What's the organ that represents the municipal clerk? In the body of local government, what's the organ that best represents what the municipal clerk's responsibilities are? I have one, but I want to ask you first.
I mean, just off the top of my head, I would say the eyes.
Why the eyes? What about the eyes?
Because we see everything. So, I mean, we see what goes on in public. We see what goes on with the board. We see what goes on within other county departments. I think we just see all.
I really like your answer. I have a different answer, but I really like your answer. I was going to say that the municipal clerk is the spinal cord or the backbone. That is, you're responsible for providing the structure and the stability that enables everything else to happen. But from your perspective, the idea that you see everything, and that's a pretty powerful one as well.
I agree with backbone. I definitely agree with that. I like that one too.
Let's move on. At the VMCA conference, I asked the municipal clerks the same question that I've been asking municipal leaders all over the country. To finish the sentence, in my community, civic engagement most often leaves people feeling blank. And the most frequent answers that came up at the municipal clerk's meeting was frustrated, unheard, confused, angry, but also heard, empowered, connected, and informed. I want to ask you about the seeming disconnect between this, because there's a difference between the sense of what local government knows it's supposed to provide and the reality of what it delivers. And sometimes it delivers really well, and sometimes it seems to frustrate the heck out of people. And by the way, I should be clear, I'm not asking you to diss on Dinwiddie County or anywhere else or to name names. So, let's just talk about this in general here. But what do you make of the sense that civic engagement can leave people feeling frustrated and angry and confused, but at the same time, it can also leave people feeling empowered and connected and heard?
I can definitely see where there was the disconnect. You have leaders who don't hear you, and then you have leaders that do. So depending on where you fall in that's going to have a huge impact on how you feel and how your civic engagement is going to be.
Camisha, I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. If people in a community are feeling, whether they're feeling frustrated, angry, and confused, or empowered and heard and connected, you're saying that you think a lot of that has to do with just the quality of leadership that's coming out of the elected members of the council itself, their openness, their willingness to recognize and respect the people in the community?
Yes. Leadership has a huge factor into whether the citizens have trust in their elected officials.
If I was to really press you on this and ask you, is it the elected officials and their behaviors that matters, or is it the structure of government, the rules, the ordinances, the limitations that are put on? Would you put the weight more to one or the other?
I would probably say more of the structure, but that's also for me, depending on the leadership in the locality. It could be behavior. You could have a board or a council that's very difficult to work with. Then you can have a board or council that is easy to work with. It also depends on, I feel like it goes a lot into experience as well, where you could have a board that has years of experience and they know the structure and they know what goes into the structure of being a board city council, or you could have people who with limited experience on it and are just trying to find their way, and that's when it becomes difficult to manage.
I understand that the first position that you had was not necessarily a pleasant or productive experience. Can you tell us a little bit about your first position and what you experienced there?
Absolutely. So I became the assistant city clerk in the first locality I was in. And within, I would say, 3 months, the city clerk calls me in her office and says, I'm leaving. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, okay, what happens now? And she says, you're it. You're up. Like, next batter up. You're the clerk. You're going to be the clerk. So, get ready. So she turns in her resignation to council and she leaves. And then I become the city clerk to a 7-person council. And this council was not a team, hidden agendas. There were arguments, screaming matches during board meetings or council meetings. Meetings would go on for hours, getting nothing accomplished. Just a very, I don't want to use hostile, but essentially a hostile environment. And it was a really difficult position that was probably one of those times where I sat there and I thought to myself, is being a clerk really for me? Is this what it's really like?
Camisha, I gather that this challenge is not atypical among other municipal clerks. In fact, when I was at the VMCA conference with you, there was, tell me if I'm right, I sensed a concern that despite all the values that we talked about, professionalism, integrity, capability, between all those things that are supposed to be baked into the clerk function, that the challenges of distrust and incivility between the public, between elected office holders, and sometimes even among other staff, that those things all are severe challenges to do the work of being the clerk, of being the backbone of the local government function. Am I hearing that right?
Yes, it's definitely, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but just meeting and speaking with other clerks from around the state, it's a rarity to have a situation where you have this like counselor board that bumps heads and makes your life more or makes your work more challenging. I think you typically see more of the my board gets along, I get along with my county administrator, we're a team. Yeah, I think it's rare that you get the disconnected localities.
In that first community that you were serving, which we should be clear was not Dinwiddie, it was somewhere else. And
Correct.
I'm respecting, we're not actually naming them here, and that's totally fine. But in preparing for this, you told me that it was a toxic environment. Is the nature of it being a toxic environment really that the elected officials themselves, you said that they weren't a team, that they had these screaming matches? Is that the toxic that you're referring to?
Yes. Towards each other, towards staff, towards me included within staff. It just was not a team environment.
I'm wondering if there are people who might be listening to this interview. They may not be in positions as municipal clerks. They might be in any other place, but they have self-doubt. What would you tell people generally that they need to know about themselves to feel confident in their own self-worth?
That's very hard for me because I still myself struggle with self-doubt. Even here, in Dinwiddie, sometimes I just have that moment where I'm like, can I really do this? I I still have my self-doubt at times as well. The funny thing, I try to remember it, it just makes me laugh because I think about it. I'm trying to remember the name of the book. I'm pretty sure it's Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss. And the quote that like you're youer than you, that's truer than true. There's no one alive that's more youer than you. I try to remember that like there's no one else on this earth like me. I am me. This person is them. You are you. There is no one alive that is more youer than you. So I just have to remember that I am me. And I feel like that's one thing that a lot of people struggle in life. We want to be like everybody else, or we want to be like this person. We want to be like that person. No, be you. Just be you. And on those days when you doubt yourself and you doubt that you can do the work or get this accomplished, or you're just having a bad day, just remember bad days don't last forever. Just be you and take one day at a time. And that's all you can do. You have to give yourself grace. You have to.
So let's fast forward a little bit. You've survived this toxic atmosphere, and I'm wondering if knowing your self-worth, if there's a specific instance you can describe where knowing it made a tangible difference in how you approached a problem or a conflict later on. How did this awareness kind of impact your ability to achieve an important outcome for a community that you serve?
I think a big part of my self-worth, surprisingly, one thing that I feel is essentially tied to self-worth is empathy. And I feel that being an empathetic person does help in a public or government setting. I work a lot with the public here in the county, and I'm usually like I guess I would say, being the county administrator's assistant, I'm the first line of defense. So if a citizen has an issue or a concern, they essentially would talk to me before they would get to the county administrator. I hate to veer off of the story, but um, here in the county, we have a phrase, and it's strive. So it's a bunch of core values that, coincidentally enough, our county attorney took all these core values that we wanted for the county. He took them and looked at them and said, hey, it spells strive. The S, stewardship. You're testing me right now. Stewardship is S. T, teamwork. R is respect. I, okay, integrity. That's our most important one, because we've actually made the I a different color in our logo. I wish I had it to show you, but the I is green, integrity. V, value added customer service. And E is excellence. So that makes strive. So that those values are what we are all about. Those are the values that we strive to bring to our citizens. That integrity, the value added customer service, the excellence, the respect. So that's probably one thing that drew me to the county as well, because I saw that and I was like, wow, that's impactful.
And you're saying these aren't just words. This is a county that actually lives these values.
Yes.
Camisha, what you've just said makes me want to reflect back on the discussion we had earlier about what body part equals the function of a municipal clerk. And you said eyes and I said spinal cord. But when you were talking about serving members of the public who may be coming in a more agitated state, they might be angry, they might be fearful, they might be worried, they might be confused. It made me think that there was a different body part that we should pick. And let me ask you about this. If someone went into an emergency room and they were panicked and they were all agitated, what's the first thing someone would tell them to do? What's the first thing that they would do in a medical situation to help them get under control?
Guess tell them to breathe.
They would tell them to
down.
Breathe. And so I wonder if the organ that we shouldn't have been focusing on for a municipal clerk is the lungs, and that somehow you're the respiration system, the respiratory system of the local government, because your job is to calm down those who are agitated. But at the same time, it may be to agitate within the local government to make sure that it understands that there's an issue or a concern that deserves attention and that it needs to pick up the pace a little bit to pay attention to it. So it's the syncing up of the emotional state and the substantive state, which we do through breath. What do you think about that as an alternative?
That's a good one too. I definitely think, not only for citizens, I don't think, to tell them to breathe. I think we do that for our staff and our board and our councils too, because sometimes they get to a state where they're like nervous, panicky, and we just say, hey, breathe, like it's going to be okay. So I agree with the lungs. That's a good one too.
Camisha, you've been wonderfully revealing about the role of a municipal clerk and what you've learned from it. I'm hoping I can invite you into our lightning round. And the lightning round is a bunch of questions that I'm going to ask you to answer in one sentence only.
Oh, no pressure.
You ready?
Yeah.
Camisha, describe your leadership style in 3 words.
Emotional but firm.
What's one thing people would be surprised to learn about the job of a municipal clerk?
I guess I would say you have to be up for every challenge.
What's one must-see place for a first-time visitor to Dinwiddie County, Virginia?
Pamplin Historical Park.
I'll give you one more sentence. What will they find there?
history, beautiful landscapes.
Camisha, what's the most impactful leadership advice you've ever received?
Always be slow to react.
What's a small change you'd like to see in local government that could make a big difference?
More empathy and humanity.
If you could send a message back in time to yourself just before you took your first position as a municipal clerk, what would it say?
You can do it. You are worthy. You've got this.
Camisha Brown, in the face of adversity, what gives you strength?
Staying true to myself and knowing my worth.
What is something specific that a mayor, a council member, a supervisor can do to genuinely appreciate and support their municipal clerk?
Being a team and having open and honest communication. Because if you're not a team and you don't communicate, that's where you won't have that strong relationship to be successful.
Camisha, last question.
Okay.
We live in divisive times. What gives you hope for the future?
Being leaders for the generations coming up behind us. Just setting the example, being better, just becoming better than what was before us. Like, we cannot change the past. We can only control what's going on in the present, and what we do in the present will affect what happens in the future. So we have to lead by example.
Camisha Brown, thank you for sharing your experiences and being open to this conversation. It was wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Once again, my thanks to Camisha Brown, Executive Assistant to the County Administrator and Clerk to the Board of Supervisors of Dinwiddie County, Virginia. And also thanks again to the Virginia Municipal Clerks Association for the privilege of conducting my civility and community engagement workshop called From Conflict to Conversation at their annual conference. This episode was produced by Kerry Lengel and edited by Nick Living the Dream Tantillo. Jenna Maisel is our production assistant. Our executive producer is John Little. I'm Matt Lehrman of Social Prosperity Partners. If you have a question, comment, or story to share, reach me at 602-688-2724 or podcast at socialprosperity.us. I'd love to hear from you. We'll be back soon with another Community Catalyst.